Tactical Craft podcast, and I heard you talk a lot about Sato, and I had doubt. Now I don't.
Right.
So tell me how Sato's off-season went and how you got him to improve so great with Ryan.
We really didn't. This is what I think people don't quite understand is he's playing well at the moment, but he's not on a level that he wasn't last season. It's just the meta and the way the comps work, and maybe the team around him is like we're feeling a bit better than we did in GOATs. But it's like I said on the podcast, and I've said it a million times before. If you're a Reinhardt player, it's like you're the first one to die every time, right? So if your team is worse than their team, you're the one that's going to die every time. Even if you're playing flawless gameplay, you will be the one to die. And that's how it was with Sato and GOATs. And I really think that on the podcast I said, what did I say? 2 months before, people start to turn it around and say, oh, you know, I always said Sato was good. I think it took 2 games, and I think people are going to start to realise it already. Sorry, the stairs. We should have.
So Sebastian, for GG Recon, I think for Poko and for the team, your play against Florida was like night and day compared to their game against the Outlaws. Did you kind of look at that match and say, okay, whatever they did, don't do that, do the opposite of that, and move forward with there, or was it, did you have a game plan coming in?
Yeah, I mean, we were expecting them to play a lot of Brigitte and Anna, so we were like, okay, what can we do against this composition? Because we checked that the Brigitte and the Macri were like flanking a lot. So that was leaving the Anna alone, so my job was like either to like protect my team from the Macri flanking or go on the Anna, which is alone, so I can 1v1. So yeah, we did homework this morning and I think paid off pretty well.
Joyce from OverwatchLeague.com. Next week you guys head off to Washington and you'll be facing off against New York and Toronto. How's your mentality going into those matches after this week, and what you saw from them in week 1 impact how you're going to prepare at all?
We have 2 matches next week?
Yes, we do.
Sorry.
It's 1 the week after. I mean, our mentality couldn't be much better this weekend. Realistically, couldn't have gone much better. The whole event was crazy. The results were perfect. Both teams, Toronto and New York, both went 2-0 in their first week, so we know that it's probably going to be tougher games, especially the New York one. Obviously, there's a lot of history between our team and their team, both not just the cities, but in Overwatch as well. But that's what it was. We knew it was important this week to come in and get wins in front of the home crowd, and now we've got to go and we've got to beat the teams at the top. And then if we win those 2 games, then it's looking good for the mid-season tournament or whatever it's called.
So we haven't seen much of KDG, and me and the press, we haven't seen much of KDG at all this weekend. What, as a coach on the team, what's his vision? What has he communicated to you, and sort of what is the structure that is being set up under his leadership?
Yeah, I spoke to you guys yesterday about how the Korean way of doing things is different to the Western one. And he actually has it tattooed on his arm. You guys might not know this, but it's make your role or something along those lines. And I think that's like his philosophy when it comes to coaching, is that every single player needs to know exactly their role in each comp. Like, all you need to worry about is these 3 things. Like Poko told you just before, like my job was either to do this or to do that, and that's kind of the concept that he tries to preach to everyone on the team. Everyone knows the 2 things, like Astro knows it more than anyone, the 2 things he's got to look out for every time, and if he doesn't look out for it, KDG's going to tell you, hey, you missed it again. But that's kind of the philosophy that he's trying to do, is as long as all 6 people know their role and can do their job, then you've got a team, and you don't necessarily have to do it team out. You can do it individual, and then as long as they all do their job, then we have a coordinating team,
Jonathan Tippin, Watchpoint Lobby. What are the 2 things that you have to do? It sounded like he had.
I've got a lot more than 2 things. I only just help Sato, try and make people not die, and try and not die myself. That's normally what I get told.
Harrison Brown from Total Sports Live. Is there a new sense of pride for representing Philadelphia after really seeing it this weekend, how much they're behind you?
100%, yeah. Yeah, I said this, maybe it wasn't to you guys, but I said this yesterday, where obviously I come from England, which is football, soccer. It's like a huge part of the sporting culture over there. And I understand more than anybody that when your team wins or loses, the morale of the city changes. And obviously I don't think the Fusion's necessarily got Philadelphia dancing up and down yet. But it was only when I got here yesterday and then I sat in the crowd a little bit and I felt the atmosphere, and I realized that this is actually pretty important to most of them, and then how we perform and how we train in the week actively affects 1,500, I don't know the attendance, close to that, their weekends. They might go away this weekend and say, we had a good time because we won, And it's only once you kind of realize like how, even if it's just a little thing, it's so important to so many people that our job's kind of maybe even more pressure, you know? Especially playing in front of the home crowd, you know?
Eric Williamson, Edge of Philly Sports. What was some takeaways that you really have from this weekend?
Yeah, the Philly crowd is exactly what they told me it was going to be.
A lot of booing.
A lot of booing, which is the main thing. I knew we were going to get cheers, but I'm glad we got boos. It was nice to let all of the Mayhem guys walk out one by one so we could just boo them all. That's exactly how it needs to be. No, they were good.
Even when they like won one round of golf, there was booing in the crowd, and that was just like, it was pretty satisfying to listen to.
So you talked yesterday a little bit about what you do each week to prepare for the next week, and we have hero pools coming in soon, so I was wondering how you plan on keeping the team in sync when you're having them try out for the different weeks, and how you're going to be a cohesive team each week with a almost full roster.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I wish I could answer it, because I don't know. What I'll say is this week we had 2 games, right? Yesterday was kind of like almost a blind game where we didn't know what Washington were going to do, and we kind of just had to set ourselves up to do the best we can, and whatever they threw at us, we'll deal with it. And then obviously today was more, we'd seen their VOD, so we, at least like Poko said, we were all able to sit down and review. So like there's 2 different ways, one blind and one where we were like structured. And I think what hero pools is going to end up being is almost every week is blind, right? Like last season, the first game of each stage was blind. You just went in, if what they played. If you had the same read on the meta as they did, that's fine. And then as time went on, everyone would copy from the good teams and you would prepare for the enemy teams. Whereas with hero pools, it's every week. You just gotta, okay, new patch, let's figure it out, let's see what happens. Whatever they play, they play. There's going to be much less emphasis on scouting, I think, and more about like how we do it internally ourselves.
And I feel like, I forgot what I was going to say.
You sort of half answered the question I'm about to ask, but what do you think is going to be the most important thing about coaching? Like I'm assuming it's probably going to change a lot once hero pools, at least a little bit once it gets added in. And do you think that like trying to predict what enemy teams are going to run is going to be important, or do you think it's going to be more?
It might be impossible. It might be impossible, to be honest. It'll be interesting to see if the teams who have a style of Overwatch can translate that across metas. If a team that, like New York is one of the teams that was infamous for having the same style where they would like kind of group up, they would play around Jonak, and it was always like this slow, whatever you do, we're going to counter it play style. And maybe they're a team that's on a level where they can adapt that play style to each meta, but it might not be possible, to be honest with you. What was the first part of the question? I'm sorry.
How do you think?
Yes. Yeah. I think the hardest thing is going to be, the most important thing is going to be structure, right? Like we're going to need, we have what, 4-5 days max practice each week before, so we're going to need to have a certain amount of time where we're allowed to experiment and a certain amount of time where we say, this is what we're going to do, regardless of if it's the best or not the best. We can't be a team that experiments 4 days a week and then on match day just figures out, okay, well, this is what we're going to do, right? So I think the teams who have the most structure in terms of how they do day to day, their experimentation are going to be the teams that have more advantage rather than just the teams with the genius coaches or whatever, you know? I think structure is going to be the most important thing.
Oh, I don't know why I raised my hand. Yes, thank you, Professor. So my question's for Poko. So last season, Gouzerch was not very kind to Philadelphia. What about you? What's your goal as a player this year? You know, how do you want to live your season?
Yeah, I mean last year we were like struggling with like DPS player on tank and support that wasn't made for us, and we were like struggling as a team, I think. But yeah, I mean I think this season we improved our roster. We have like really good people, and like so far we have a really good coaching staff, which is helping us a lot. a lot on like strategy and also how to play as a team, and even giving us advice on how to play like my diva role, for example. So yeah, I mean I think this season is gonna be like probably the best season Fusion ever had.
And you made it to the grand finals, so it's gonna be better than that. Nice.
So you two come from very different spaces. You're coming in for the first time as an Overwatch League player. You've been here. You've been through the things. So how is it like becoming a team? Do you do anything to bond? Do you, I don't know, sing Kumbaya around a campfire? How do you bond as a team?
I think we just scrim a lot of hours and we get to know each other slowly. I mean, we had like a month-long boot camp in Korea, which really helped with team bonding. We'd go out and eat and talk every day. So I think that's like really accelerated how fast we've bonded as a team.
These two live together, so that helps them quite a bit as well.
All right, last question.
Nope, you go ahead.
Oh, thanks. So besides Atlanta, every team in your division saw some action this weekend. For better or worse, did anyone surprise you? And who do you think is coming out as the strongest teams in the division right now?
I don't even know who's in our
Yeah,
division.
I don't know who's in our division.
We have
We just show up to the matches.
It's you guys, Atlanta, Florida,
It's the four
Houston,
teams.
and NYXL.
yeah.
No, not NYXL.
But the-
Washington.
Oh, so
The
Atlanta's
way-
probably the best
yeah.
team in our division.
The way the structure works, it's like, it's not the 5, it's the 10 that are in our division because we play them all twice, right?
Well,
Like,
that's a conference.
That's a conference.
Yeah.
but it's still the same amount of games, so whatever you call it, they're equal, right? Like we play New York as many times as we play Atlanta. So yeah, like Atlanta probably are the most impressive, even though they didn't play, which probably speaks to the level of the other teams in our division. Without trying to be too cocky. And then obviously New York, and I think Toronto too. I think Toronto surprised a few people. They're on our half.
No,
Our half, not
Our
our
half?
quarter. Not our quarter, our half.
I think so. But I like Toronto a lot. I like the project they've got. I like the coaching staff. So I think I'm glad they're 2-0, and hopefully it's going to be 2-1 next week though.
All right. Thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Good luck next week.
Thank you.